Hello everyone, and welcome to Plane Time. I'm Ben Coleman, your host for today, and we're coming to you live and in the clear from the studios here in Orlando, Florida, with the Florida Aviation Network, and it is a project of the National Aviation Safety Foundation. And this is a volunteer-run and organized event, if you will. If it wasn't for our volunteers, you would not be getting the benefit of this presentation. That being said, does anyone understand why we use the term in the clear, live and in the clear? A little education for you. In the old days, we used to give these presentations on behalf of the FAA and the Orlando FAASTeam, as a matter of fact, but it was to dedicated sites, and those dedicated sites were scrambled, on a scrambled signal. So if you didn't have the decoder, you couldn't receive the transmission. And this was satellite generated, so we're coming a long way. We're live and in the clear. Plane Time is actually, it's an effort to accentuate the maintenance side of the aviation industry. And we all too often focus on just the operational aspects and the pilotage and the aeronautical decision making required to have a successful and safe flight. Maintenance is so valuable and critical, and unless you've had a mechanical problem, you probably don't really appreciate just how important the maintenance aspect is in this business. One of the ways to get this information across is through the FAA's FAASTeam, or FAASTeam Program. And we are fortunate enough today to have one of the safety program managers, Mr. Bob Jex, here with us as a guest today, to share with us some of his philosophies, something about the man. What makes Bob Jex tick? And what makes him so dedicated to get this message out and to help you and us, the public? With that, I'm going to welcome Bob Jex.
Good morning, Ben. Pleasure to be here.
I know it is a pleasure. And you know, whenever I see Bob, it's always a smile on his face, unless it's a frown on his face from an unfortunate situation, and I told Bob we were going to do this, as this is a very serious business that we're in, and we often get kind of wrapped up in trying to make things light, jovial, almost entertaining. But aviation safety can be entertaining, but it's very serious. We take it serious, and we don't want that to be overshadowed by the way that we like to make things kind of entertaining and educational. But without education, we're in deep trouble. And getting back to Bob, what do you have to do with the FAA and the FAASTeam, and from an educational aspect?
Thanks, Ben. I'm glad for your question. And before I answer it, I just want to pay a huge tribute to the Florida Aviation Network and the work that they're doing. Great work on a continuous basis, year-round, not just today, not just once a month, but they are very busy, often behind the scenes, year-round. A FAASTeam industry member, Florida Aviation Network, and spearheaded by Obi Young, who I used to work with at the Orlando FAASTeam, and of course, the great Benji Coleman, another one of my predecessors, and I'm very, very proud to be in their presence today. So I want to just give a shout out to the Florida Aviation Network and all the volunteers that help make this thing work. So I'm very, very glad to be here. It's great to be here. I love working with the FAASTeam. The FAASTeam is a accident prevention arm of the FAA. We're very actively engaged in helping to prevent accidents and help pilots plan their aviation activities more successfully than the statistics would sometimes bear out. So we're out there kind of like dentists trying to prevent cavities. We're out there trying to help prevent accidents. And we get plenty of action, plenty of work, and we make it happen with a large team of volunteers.
You know, Bob, it's funny you mentioned the medical aspect and doctors and so forth and the practitioners. Do you know why they call it the medical practice?
I suppose because it's never quite finished. They're never quite finished on a patient. They come back to them again and again.
Well, I liken that to you practicing safety, because when Bob is out there practicing safety, he's always striving for that mark. And until we make it to that mark, we're not going to be satisfied in this business.
It's a bullseye we're all shooting for, and we sometimes hit it and we sometimes miss, but we're always shooting for that bullseye of safety and a perfect flight.
And Bob, you know, I mentioned that we were going to keep this serious, but this is a very, very humorous note. Has anyone happened to notice my head and how slick it is? Hair is overrated. It really is. And I do this, actually this is a streamlining effect. On my motorcycle, if I'm riding without a helmet, and I do ride without a helmet on occasion, but, and there's a reason for that too, ask me someday. I get an extra quarter mile an hour with the lack of the hair drag.
Less wind resistance.
And actually, I was losing so much of it that I just figured, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it all the way. Let's go all in on this and just get all of it off.
It may turn out to be a good move, Benji.
Now, that's enough about me. Bob Jex, where were you born? Where did you come up from? Where were you reared?
It's a long story. I was born in Baltimore, raised in Berwyn, Pennsylvania, and just had a wonderful childhood in Berwyn. My parents would probably tell you that the first thing I wanted to be when I grew up was a fireman, and at the age of 3 I wandered off, probably gave my mom her first gray hairs. I wandered off at the age of 3 to the Berwyn fire station, the oldest fire station in the country, and I had somehow learned the route to go from our little house on Bartholomew Road up to the fire station, and the firemen took good care of me up there until my mom found me, and she was scared to death, but the firemen picked me up. And
you were 3 years old?
I was 3 years old, and they let me see the fire pole. They wouldn't let me slide down it, but it was a wonderful experience, and that's just, I have a lot of gratitude to the folks at the Berwyn Fire Station. A little later on, they took me to an air show, my parents did, up at the now defunct NAS Willow Grove. Mm-hmm. And there, for the first time, I saw the Blue Angels flying their F-4J Phantoms. And for a young kid of age 10 to see that was just amazing. I was so enthralled. I said, I'm not sure what I want to do for a living, but it involves something like that. And I wound up going to school, rode in school, got into Navy ROTC. Actually went through my ROTC classes with the great Chris Ferguson, who flew the space shuttle for the very last time. He was the commander of Atlantis. He was one of my classmates in ROTC. I wound up in naval aviation, boyhood dream. And I had gone in to be a pilot. They said, your eyes are not good enough. We're going to make you a navigator. And since you're coming from an engineering background at a really good school, we're going to put you in EA-6Bs, which was my first choice anyway. Mm-hmm. So I got into electronic warfare with the EA-6B Prowler. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And I would want to say to the audience, if you are a young person contemplating going into the military, please give it serious consideration, because there you will work with some of the best people you'll ever meet in your whole life. They are family, they are friends, they are loyal, they're patriotic, and they are smart. Good people that you'll meet in the military. And some of my lifelong friends come from a military background.
I don't think that gets enough attention these days, Bob. You don't hear that much from the news media, and unless you're around somebody doing as far as trying to get the enrollments up, you just don't hear about it that much. But the military has so much to offer.
It's true. You can do a lot more than just serve your country. You can learn skills, you can learn discipline, you can get some structure in your life, maybe for the first time. And for a new brand of young people, that is a very important thing that many have missed out on, and they'll sure get it when they get into the military. I strongly recommend not necessarily joining the military, but do your homework, do your research, find out what it's about, talk to people who are serving there now, and find out if the military career might be for you. Even a couple of years in the military, you can be a changed person, and I really do mean that. I highly encourage people to look into it. We live in an all-volunteer force. There is no draft. You have to register for the draft in case we have to bring it back. But right now, our incredible military is an all-volunteer force. People are there because they want to be, not because somebody is holding, a mallet over their head. They're saying, "Go! We want to join the military because it serves our needs and it serves our country."
Well, Bob, if you were wandering around when you were 3 years old in the neighborhood and losing track of yourself, you were probably a wonderful candidate for the military.
I don't know. I wasn't lost. My mom had lost sight of me for a little while, but I knew exactly where I was. And so I felt good about that. I went straight to my destination, the firehouse, and the firemen took great care of me, and they called my mom. They said, "Little boy, where are you from?" And I gave them my phone number, and they called Mom, and she came up breathless to recollect me. I want to say something. The fire trucks back in the day would sometimes take us for rides at the town fair. You could climb up on the back of the hose truck and ride on top of the coil-up hoses, and they would take you for rides all through the town. And we would be holding on for dear life onto these railings as the fire truck, with the siren wailing, would go all through the streets of the town. And us little kids.
You can still do that today, can't you?
Well, I think you can.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah. I just need a helmet now. But there we were as little kids, and I think of what it would be like today if a fire truck and fire guys did that. They'd be put in jail for child endangerment. But how we made it through our childhood, I don't know. It's a story I love to tell about my childhood, is riding on fire trucks as a little kid.
Speaking of childhood, tell us a little bit more. What kind of student were you?
Oh,
were you
gosh.
a good learner?
I would like to say I was a pretty good learner, but I only got that way through hard work. I had to really work at learning things. Once I learned them, I knew I would be okay at teaching them to someone else. And that was where the spark was lit first to become an instructor. Once I learned something, I knew that I would love teaching it to other people. And eventually that led to a career as a flight instructor.
Mm-hmm. Well, when you take things, again, to the correlation level, you really don't fully understand it unless you can properly and safely teach it.
It's true. To teach it to someone else. Confucius said that to teach is to learn twice. And to teach it as a flight instructor is to learn it, again, as a student pilot would. And it's fun teaching it to somebody. It's fun seeing their eyes light up when they finally understand something maybe they had trouble with. And if you're able to explain it to them for the first time and they learn it, their eyes light up and their skills improve from there.
So Bob, from what I understand it, what really set the hook with you was watching the Blue Angels in their F-4 Phantoms.
That got me going, yes sir.
Okay, you have learned a lot since that day that you said, that's what I want to do. And how much through that, and I'm going to come up with a phrase here of, you ever heard the term aviation in itself is not inherently dangerous, but to a far greater degree than the sea is terribly unforgiving of any incapacities, negligence. That's true. Now, that transition from watching those F4s, you have learned a lot from then to today. So as far as the negligence and the incapacities, is that what drives you to be so involved with the FAA's efforts?
It is it's a devastating thing to lose somebody in aviation, and I've lost a lot of friends in the business. Because of that, I, as much as anybody, am spurred on by the safety aspects of what we do. Every time I go flying, I put a little bit of everything that I've ever learned into the cockpit and into the flight planning process. And I love sharing that with other people, especially where it is possible to help prevent accidents. I'm not the subject matter expert on everything. I would be remiss to say that I was. But I love bringing subject matter experts into a planning process, into an educational process where their expertise, their experience, their knowledge can be shared with other people. And in my current line of work, I have a wonderful opportunity to do that on a daily basis.
Bob, we're going to do this in 3 different segments, and this is all involving something that I'm not that familiar with. Maybe you could tell us about the WINGS program.
Benji, I'm so glad you asked me about the Wings program. It's been around since the 1970s, and it has morphed into a really versatile program these days. A pilot can begin working on this Pilot Proficiency Award program by taking courses, by attending classes, by earning certificates, and by getting flight instruction in just about any platform. When I say platform, I mean aircraft. Just about any platform or aircraft that they would care to learn in. And they fly their flights with flight instructors who validate their flight credits. They take knowledge courses, and a lot of that is semi-automated through the internet. They can earn their knowledge credits. You put the proper flight credits and knowledge credits together into what is called a phase of wings, and we have 3 levels: basic, advanced, and masters, which correlates to private, commercial, and ATP skill levels. It's free to participate. It is rewarding, enriching, and you learn some lifelong skills and possibly even some life-saving skills by doing the Wings program. The whole program is centered around causes that are known to the FAA to be related to general aviation accidents. And because of that, they emphasize skills and drill down and emphasis on areas where accidents have traditionally blossomed up in an effort to prevent those accidents. And the Wings program is wonderful. Did you know that if you complete a phase of Wings, you can actually enter a sweepstakes and earn up to $1,500 as a winner in the sweepstakes? It's from one of our partners called the Wings Industry Network, and they have a Wings sweepstakes. The winners will be selected at the end of the year, and the top 4 winners will earn up to $1,500. Not bad. That's good beer drinking money.
And there's a lot of folks that are listening to this now that either don't have a clue about the Wings program, or they're engaged in it every chance they get. And I'm sorry, Bob, I need to correct you. It's not free. It does take an investment of your time and your effort and your determination to ride through with it.
Hopefully those things you were already investing into your professionalism and your development. So there's no additional cost, no out-of-pocket cost for most of what you do. There is a website that, as a FAASTeam Program Manager, it's kind of like the center of my universe. It's called the FAASTeam.gov website, and strangely enough, the internet address is www.faasafety.gov. Go there, you can register for a free account and get started in the Wings program.
If you don't go to FAASafety.gov, you really don't know what you're missing out on as far as all the information, the background. There's so many paths. You really have to watch your time, because you get so enthralled that you lose track of it, and it'll be days before you come away from that website.
I will tell you, the catalog of online courses in just that website is over 600 courses. Most of them are free. Some of them are offered by commercial providers, and they're not free, but they're offered at a very modest cost. And for completing these online courses, a person can often earn Wings credits, sometimes multiple Wings credits, to include even a phase or even multiple phases at a single completion. It's wonderful. And the program is very versatile. You can be working at several phases at the same time. You can be working on phases even if you don't have a pilot certificate. And as soon as you get that pilot certificate, you can use your training to parlay for an actual complete phase.
And Bob, you probably didn't realize this, but do you know that if one of our viewers are watching this program, that they could actually qualify for Wings credit if they go to the bottom?
Today's session right now is going to qualify you for Wings credit. It's just a wonderful opportunity to take advantage of what people who have been in the business for a while have to say to folks who are trying to do it better, safer, more efficiently. They're out there, they want to share their message. I want to help them share their message.
And Bob, we've been batting it around pretty much just about you and a little bit of background, but in the other 2 phases, the other two segments here with Plane Time, we're going to get more into the meat and potatoes. But I really wanted to develop the fact that people, they see Bob Jex' name over a lot of different documents and correspondence. But it's so important to know the person behind the name, because without the people involved with this industry, it's really nothing. It's all about the people.
It is all about people.
And that's why I want to get more into your background. We know you went into the naval aviation. You were in the E6.
I was what they call an electronic countermeasures officer, or an ECMO, on EA-6Bs. Later, I got out of the Navy on active duty and joined the reserves. I had served on 3 different aircraft carriers, USS John F. Kennedy, USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, and USS Theodore Roosevelt on active duty. Loved it, loved it, loved it. If somebody said to me, Bob, we want you to go back to the cockpit of flying an EA-6B again, I'd say, where do I sign up? I loved it, I miss it a lot. But those were days that had a limited number. I joined the reserves and had a wonderful time in the reserves flying EP-3Js. I forgot to tell you, my last job on active duty, I was what they call a Tactical Action Officer, or a TAO, on the USS Theodore Roosevelt. That is the person who is in charge of the defense of the ship should it come under attack. Very stressful job, and I loved it. I loved it. You were in the middle of everything, and there was so much going on. You're making decisions left and right, leading watch teams, and occasionally launching a missile at a target. We never had to shoot in combat, but we were sure trained for it. And there were some, like I said before, some really smart people that worked in those combat teams, and I was honored to be amongst them. In the reserves, I flew a different aircraft called the EP-3 Juliet, EP-3J, the Hydra. It was another electronic warfare mission. We went to different places than we would have gone with an aircraft carrier. We were flying a P-3 Orion. So we went to a whole lot of different places and just had a wonderful time doing a lot of that work with our maritime allies. In the reserves, I also joined a unit in Orlando. I took a recall to active duty and served over in the Middle East in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. I worked out of the U.S. Embassy there as in the U.S. Liaison Office. One of the greatest jobs I ever had. I don't look back at anything with any regret. I had a wonderful time over in the UAE, wonderful people over there. The Emiratis were wonderful hosts. The country is just an amazing place. And the U.S. Embassy staff there working for the State Department and for the Department of Defense over in our embassies are just second to none. Great people to work with.
Bob, you mentioned a term that I'd like to bring up initially now, but in some of the other segments, but you made decisions. You made decisions when you were in your last big decisions, protecting the ship. Some people have a very, very hard time making a decision about what to order off of the menu at a restaurant. Okay? Now, I can't imagine there being too much indecision time for you when you're in that high volume, high complexity, high tension, high impact. I mean, so is there anything that you can share with us quickly about how you better make decisions based on your background and how to get yourself out of the goo when you get into a, oh, what do I do here situation?
Part of the decision process is having good information. And I would brief my watch teams, I need good information in order to make a good decision. If the information changes, the decision might necessarily change. It helps to know that you have good intel coming from your intel sources. And you have to study those things before you even go on watch. So before a watch would start, you'd be preparing yourself for that session, for that duty session, that watch, for 1, maybe even 2 hours prior to even going on, where you're just reading up on the latest intel reports and you're talking with people that are currently on station and getting a turnover from them prior to them handing over the reins to you for your control. And that is a very important part, is getting pre-information and knowing your training, knowing what the rules are, what the current situation is. You have to go into it with your eyes and ears open.
Excellent point. Excellent point. And Bob, do you know a guy by the name of Obi Young?
I've heard of him.
Okay, Obi Young is going to throw me under the bus for this, but you know all these aircraft that you've mentioned, the E-6B, the
Prowler.
Yeah. And how about the P-3 Orion?
The Hydra, yes, sir.
I got to imagine that Obi's going to drop in just a quick little picture of what that airplane is if you don't know what a... Maybe later on, maybe in post, but anyway, this talking about planning, you know, if we had planned this out, we'd have had those pictures in front of us. But here's another thing, a beauty part about today's society and information flow, the internet. You're curious of what a P-3 Orion is? Look it up. It's there. So there's really no reason for us not to have information and knowledge with as much as available to us. And it's our own fault if we don't know. If we're ignorant about something, it's because we choose to be ignorant.
I have worked with students who were ignorant, and I said, that is a condition I can work with. I have also worked with students in the past who were lazy. That is much tougher to work with. It is a tough conversation to have with a lazy student, to tell them that they're lazy. It actually brought one student to tears, and I didn't mean to do that, but I wanted to shake him up and say, you're in a position to learn. I want you to learn. It's my job to teach you as your instructor, but it's your job to absorb it and to assimilate it into what we call flying skills and flying proficiency. If you'll meet me halfway, complete the assignments that I give you, we got a ball game. If you're not going to do those assignments, you're not going to learn.
And Bob, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room. How about the stupid student?
I don't want to say stupid. It's a tough word for me. There are people out there with learning disabilities, God bless them. And it's sometimes a challenge for the instructor to identify a person with learning disability. And I don't want to insult anybody. I do sometimes need to shock them in order to change their behavior. There is a definition of learning. It is a change in behavior as a result of experience. Sometimes we want people to experience kind of a negative outcome in order to turn towards a more positive route. That is sometimes a good thing. A young boy puts his hand on a hot stove and learns very quickly that when Mama says, don't touch the hot stove, he learns Mama means it, and Mama doesn't want anything to happen, but sometimes the little boy has to put his hand on a hot stove to learn that warning has some meaning. And Mama means the best for the little kid.
Well, see, you're much more delicate with it, and being a mechanic, I can say that we really dealt with some stupid mechanics out there. I'm sorry, guys. Roger, I'm sorry I mentioned that. I'm sorry, Roger. I didn't mean to call you out. But and really, the term ignorance is not bad, and I agree with you totally there.
Ignorance is a condition that can be corrected.
And there's some people that are extremely intelligent in some areas, but completely the antithesis of intelligence in other areas. That might be called stupid, but I don't know. But but folks that cannot, they're incorrigible. They can't learn. And you just mentioned the definition of learning, a modification of behavior. So, Bob, I would like to think that we're having an impact here that's positive on the viewing audience. And we're going to wrap up our first segment, and we're going to bring it back to a second segment here just a few minutes after a break. So don't go away, we'll come back.